Tonight we're going to be talking about what to do if you're married to a monster. And we're going to start by finding out if you're married to a monster, what is a monster? So to me, one of the most difficult things is monsters are like a contradiction. They're like two opposites put together. On the one hand, they are amazing, wonderful, incredible people. That's why other people fall in love with them. But under stress, they don't usually handle it very well, and they can go off the deep end. And it's usually that side of them that causes their loved ones to say, oh, boy, I think I've married a monster. So, again, they're like a contradiction in terms. They appear
I love how you said that. I love how you said that about opposites, because the reason I was attracted to Don was because he's the opposite. He's a driver, and I love that about him.
Right. And he's probably the opposite of you.
He is, because I'm more amiable, easygoing, and when we need to get stuff done, he's organized. He's on top of it. He's very methodical about it and very driven. But with that comes some strengths or traits that aren't the best for me.
Right, because he takes it a little too far sometimes.
Correct.
So they're a contradiction in this other way, too. They look like they're insensitive. They'll come across like they don't even care. But the truth is, underneath all that, they're very sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
They'll look really, really confident because they come, they push into pressure and they get all belligerent sometimes. They look confident, but the truth is they're unconfident, and it's a mask.
Ooh.
And they may think they have a great ability to communicate, but the truth is they have a very poor ability to communicate their feelings. If they feel afraid or they feel hurt, that usually shows up as anger. So they don't show fear. They don't show hurt. So what's the word there? It's not like, I don't want to say it's a lie, because they're not trying to lie, but when they're hurt, they don't show hurt. They don't match. They hurt their feelings, they get mad at you. And that they'll think they're great communicators, but they're conflicted in the communication. Does that make sense?
Especially if they've never had an example of how to communicate that. They do the best that they can with what they know. And for instance, with Dawn, it's lashing out in anger and verbal, not I would say abuse, but verbally tough words and action that comes from, rather than it being love or saying that he's hurt or he's scared or confused about, he will come out as anger, and that's very confusing because really he's hurt or confused or very sensitive or insecure about something, and it comes out always as anger, but that's what he knows because that's what his mom and dad did. And they're
Exactly. And the patterns are usually very old, just like you've described, very entrenched. But when you're with them, they'll make it seem like it's not them at all. It's you. It's your fault that they're mad, and it's your fault that they're screaming, and that you're the one that brought this out, where the truth is that chances are this has been their pattern for years and years and years and years.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yep. Here's another thing about the people we love that we call our monsters. So I like to use an example like this to talk about the comfort zone, the uncomfortable place, and the breaking point, which brings out fight or flight behavior. So you can think of it like this. Picture like living in your house, and your house is your comfort zone. You're safe, you're secure there, it's warm, you've got food in the refrigerator, you're happy, and it's a good place to be. And everybody has a comfort zone, and people like to be in it. And then if we get outside our comfort zone, we start to get uncomfortable. So picture like living on the edge of a jungle, and you leave the house, and you're out there in the jungle, and it's not like horrifying, but there's snakes out there, and there's some animals, and so you're not really quite comfortable when you're out there in the jungle. So you might go out there, but then you come on back into your house. And then on the outside edge of the jungle, there is a volcano with a lava pit. And nobody wants to get into the lava pit. And if you get too close to the lava, it's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, it's going to burn me. And you got to get away from the lava, get through the jungle, and get back into your house where you're comfortable, where your comfort zone is. So normal people, let me say average people, the average person has a fairly wide jungle before they hit the lava. But the people that we call monsters, their jungle is very narrow. So they're fine 1 minute, they're in the house, it's all good, and then some little trigger happens, they're a little uncomfortable, and then, oh my God, the lava is like at the back door, and we're going to all burn up, and oh my God, it's all your fault, and I'm going to die, and you're going to die with me, and oh my God, we got to do it right now, because it's urgent. It's very urgent. And they get very intense because to them, this is the problem, to them it is urgent and it is intense because they don't have the normal amount of uncomfortable space like an average person does have. They have a very low tolerance for discomfort. They have a very low tolerance for frustration. So they go from 0 to 60 in the blink of an eye, and that makes it really hard to be around them.
Yes. And at first, when you come across this, you try several things. At least for me personally, I tried several things. At first, I'm like, oh, don't say anything, let him just go. But then that read wrong to them. That meant to him that I didn't care and was insensitive and was blowing him off. Then I tried to go toe-to-toe with him, and that just magnified and blew things up even further. And then the third thing was I tried to say, okay, I'm sorry, whatever you wanted, and then that just made matters worse.
Right.
So I was trying the only three things I could come up with, and they were all incorrect.
Yeah, in fact, this dynamic, in my opinion, is the hardest dynamic to be in. However, it can be one of the most rewarding because usually these people, I like how you called Dawn a driver, usually without this piece in them, they are amazing people capable of incredible relationships. So we got to remember that even though they look confident, they usually are not confident. They have anxiety, and it usually flares up fast. And so the way that they usually control their anxiety is they usually try to control the people around them. And the way they control the people around them is usually by crossing other people's boundaries. So they get pushy, they push, hurry up, and they not only drive themselves, but they want to drive you. They can start tantruming, although it'll look more like rage. But to me, it's like a little temper tantrum coming out with fire behind their eyes. But underneath all that, they're usually lovable people who are scared, and that's why people fall in love with them in the first place. And that's another reason why people stay with them. Because if they were a monster all the time, nobody would stay. But it's only part of the time.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yep.
Gosh, it's so right on.
Yep. And the other
so what's
thing,
the best way? What is your suggestion to deal with them?
Okay, so we can get into that. The last thing I want to mention about the monsters is that, I might have already said this, but we got to remember that their self-esteem is really low. And so after they act like that, whether they show it or not, they usually feel really rotten inside.
Correct, but they don't normally say the simple words, I'm sorry. That's not in their vocabulary.
No, it's not, because that's, to them, I'm sorry usually means I'm wrong. And since they're insecure already and weak, then they can't possibly admit that they're sorry because then I'm wrong, which means I'm weak, and it doesn't mean that at all. It just means that to them. So Okay, so what happens in the relationship? So monsters are very difficult to live with because they do not acknowledge their poor behavior, and they may or may not have very much self-awareness about it. So it's tough because you're with somebody that doesn't get that they are intense. And I think you told me a story where one time you guys talked with someone and they asked you to rate the intensity. Do you remember that? Do you want to share about that?
Yes. We were asked by a therapist to rate our intensity from 1 to 10, 1 being mild and 10 being off the charts. And I rated him most of the time at a 10.7. He was really off. He was really off the charts. And he considered that when he spoke that his intensity was a 2. So the whole entire time it was funny because he goes, she thinks you're a 10.7 and you think you're a 2. So this is where the communication breakdown is because but that I'm thinking he is a 10, but in reality he is a 10. He may even be really a 9, but it's really it starts at 9 and goes to 10. I mean, then it just escalates from there. But in his mind, he's really a 1 or a 2, or really, to be quite honest, I would think he would say he was not even on the charts. Right. Because the self-awareness isn't there. This is the person that goes, I'm not yelling. Right? Correct. And they also have terrible listening skills. Right. When I guess it's selective listening, but still listening. Well, it's really, how do I want to put it? It's a dynamic in the brain that under stress we don't hear accurately and we filter information. So what can happen is you can say, you look nice today, and instead of hearing that as a compliment, someone who's upset and on adrenaline can hear, you look like crap all the time, and take it like a put down. So you're right that a lot of times people with this dynamic, they have a hard time listening or hearing because they get so flared up on the adrenaline so fast that the brain changes how it works and they can't hear accurately. Oh, good. Okay, so be aware that if you think you just made sense, you may or may not have made any sense to him. Correct. And that's why it's so important. So really, when the adrenaline is going, the best thing is not to truly engage. At that point, you're saying really not to engage because they think they're at a 2, I think they're at a 10. I'm trying to, say something and it may be valid and maybe valid. They're not even listening. So at that point, it's just adding fuel to the fire. Exactly, because you can think of adrenaline like whiskey. And when people get on adrenaline, it's about the same as if they're pretty darn drunk. And if you wouldn't try to have an important conversation with him when he was drunk, then it's about as effective if he's on adrenaline because he can't hear. He'll say all kinds of things, usually just to hurt you. And, in that moment, and then he may trigger your adrenaline, which is very common, and you may get into the I'm gonna get you, Daryl. Toe to toe, yeah. Yeah. Then it turns into a power struggle, and then it doesn't go anywhere. So you're right. The key on this one, we'll talk about that more in a little bit, is to stay calm. So, so to keep going on about what happens, they have low self-awareness usually. They try to meet their own needs by controlling other people around them, usually in unhealthy, destructive ways, including things like put-downs or blame or intensity. Usually whoever lives with them, such as yourself, gets mixed signals because one moment they love you and you're wonderful, and the next minute they're really mad and they tell you it's your fault. Yeah. They rarely take responsibility because they often think it is your fault. And so your own self-esteem may get shredded just by being around them. Over time, definitely.